Hello again and welcome to ManchTalk. My name's Tammy Simmons. I'm glad you're tuning in today. I've got two wonderful guests joining me today. It might be February, it might be really cold outside today, but you know, I'm always thinking about warmer weather and getting outdoors and enjoying the river and kayaking and whatnot. So this is a perfect time to start talking about Manchester and its outdoors and its mill yards and some great plans that are in the works to try to revitalize certain areas of the mill yard and get more people involved in the outdoors. Joining me today are Cliff Hurst, an old-time friend from Republican circles, and John Clayton, who everybody knows everything about Manchester. So I'm thrilled to have both of you here today to talk about Manchester Connects and what you guys are working on as far as the mill yard and connectability and whatnot. So Cliff, why don't you tell us how all of this got started?
Well, it was really interesting. Ray Wazorek asked me to ride with him when he was receiving the Libertarius Award a couple of years ago, and we talked about what was accomplished during his time as mayor and what wasn't accomplished, and one of the things was the Riverwalk. I had spent 10 years in Europe, and 3 of those years in Switzerland, by the Rhine Falls in Schaffhausen, Switzerland, and every morning I would walk along the Rhine in the beautiful Riverwalk. So when I came back to Manchester, actually we were living in Bedford at the time, I saw the plans for a Riverwalk and I was so excited, but it never happened. And so that night I didn't tell Ray, but I thought I'm going to try to get a group together, a bipartisan group, to get this done. So Ray said, if you're going to do this, there's one person you'll really need, and that's Kevin Clorty. Mm-hmm. Kevin is the person most responsible for the Verizon Center, which is one of the 10 most successful venues of its size in the United States, and the airport. And he was part of the process of getting Dean Kamen to stay here and getting him a building. And so Kevin is one of the first persons I talked to, and Kevin said it couldn't be a better time to do something. He said, I'll never forget how the psyche was in the city at the time we were building the Verizon Center and the airport, and people were really excited. And so that's how it all began. And on a winter morning, a very cold winter morning, I invited 12 people to meet at Texas Instruments because a friend of mine is an executive there, and he said, if we're going to talk about the river, why don't we meet on the edge of the river?
Makes sense.
And everybody showed up. And that morning I named Ray Wazorek and Syl Dupuis as the honorary co-chairs. And we had no money at the time, we just had an idea. But Ray said, there's another person that you should add to your list, and that's David Priest, Southern Planning Commission. So one day David said to me, we ought to interview some planners. And I thought, but we have no money. And he says, well, let's interview anyway. So we interviewed a couple of planners, and they seemed very good, but David said, there's one person that we should really talk to. I've never met her, but her name is Susan Silverberg. She teaches at MIT, but she has a small company called Civic Moxie, and they do projects around water. Well, the minute she was in the room, we knew she was the one. And so we started, and then working with Ray Wazorek, we got a government of transportation grant, government grant, and then we had to raise thousands of dollars as matching funds. And within 2 weeks, we had raised almost all the money. Thanks to people like Brady Sullivan, Arthur, Dick Anignost, Liz and Jeremy Hitchcock, Charlie Morgan, John Madden, Brady Sullivan, Dick Anignost. Yep. Anyway, that's how it all began. And so we started with the study with Susan. And I'm going to let John take it from
Sure.
there.
Thank you, Cliff. Well, what was interesting, Tammy, is because it was government funded at the beginning, the title of the project was the Manchester Multimodal and Interconnectivity Transportation
That
Study.
sounds just about accurate.
Doesn't it roll off your
It
tongue?
just does. It makes you want to just get so involved.
It's easy to get people involved with a catchy title like that. So we knew we had to do some marketing around it. And so ultimately, do a lot of brainstorming. We settled on the title Manchester Connects. Yeah. And that's how this organization has been known for the last 2 years of its existence. The grant to Civic Moxie lasted just that 2 years. Yep. And over the course of time, we had a number of public meetings open to anybody. Yep. And we had more than 400 different individuals attend the different sessions, which were brainstorming and planning and blue sky. What would you like to see?
Yep.
What do you think about when you think about Manchester? And it was fascinating to see the vision that so many people had. And, we were joking earlier that I was voted class dreamer in 1971 at West High School. And so it's like, what do you dream about with Manchester? So why don't we have fountains on the river,
Right.
like in Providence?
Right.
And why don't we illuminate them at night? So as people drive by in the Everett Turnpike, they look over and say, whoa, what is happening in this community? And so everybody gave voice to their visions. Can we rebuild a pedestrian bridge? Not the hands across the Merrimack,
Yep.
which is functional and beautiful
Yep.
in its own way, but a decorative one that
Yep.
really celebrates from Arms Park to Foundry Street, connecting the east and west side. So it has just grown into this entity that people are so excited. Our biggest problem now is asking people to be patient. One of the elements of this great book that I have here, I keep this on my nightstand now, just so you know, hoping I can absorb it through osmosis while I sleep. It's about organizing. How can this become a sustainable organization?
Right.
Because, we're going to be totally self-funded.
Right.
Creative placemaking in the mill yard, pocket parks that
Yep.
will make the place more green. We want the mill yard is 89% pavement.
Yeah.
We want to break that up and make it more welcoming. And so we have the loop we created, which is a walking tour that connects downtown Elm Street with the mill yard.
Well, and it's funny. The loop is what made me. I don't know why. I saw something and I'm like,
Yeah,
okay, I feel
posted something,
stupid
yeah.
because I don't know what the loop is, and I think of myself as somebody who's relatively involved in the community. I try to stay involved. And I'm like, how is it that I don't know what the loop is? And I'm like, oh, I guess I have to have Cliff on.
Yeah,
to tell us.
it's a developmental thing. We want people to become more engaged. Completely by coincidence, I'm the chairman of the Chamber's Downtown Committee,
Okay.
and my charge when Mike Skelton asked me to take over was to finally try to integrate mill yard with downtown.
Yep.
We've spent 150 years deliberately segregating them. That's how
Yeah.
Manchester was built. So we're trying to, buck history by doing this, but we created a walking tour that involves Stark Street, the Mill Girl statue. It goes all the way to what was the Notre Dame Bridge.
Yeah,
Now
which
the
we were
Bridge
just
Street
talking
Bridge,
about,
which is
right? The Bridge Street Bridge,
which
which
is
makes
a-
no sense
a
because
ver-
you can't have a bridge named Bridge Street.
It's a verbal non sequitur, but we're
Yeah.
trying to work around it. And, so we talk about historic elements on the loop, but also forward-looking elements. So when we get up to Commercial and Bedford Street, we talk about the new hotel that's proposed to be built in the mill yard, which will be one of the first structures built there since 1915.
Which is crazy.
Crazy, but there were exciting things happening. So we want to galvanize the people of Manchester who want to go beyond what the city will do for us. We're almost like a parent-teacher organization,
I agree.
and that we will do things above and beyond what the city will do.
Right, which I think that's what makes for a stronger. It makes for a stronger community. It makes probably for a much more sustainable
Yes.
project. It brings in people who might not necessarily want to be involved or aren't allowed to be involved
On a
because it
political
isn't
level.
the government. Right.
Right.
You don't have to be aligned with the mayor, the current mayor, which, is different than last year's mayor. You don't have to be of a certain political segment to be involved.
We are grassroots, I would say bipartisan, but actually nonpartisan,
Right.
volunteer-driven,
Yep.
and that's part of Cliff's original vision for this group. But I think he's a modest guy, but I think it's grown vastly beyond
Yep.
what he might have envisioned in the beginning when it was focused just on the Riverwalk.
Right.
Maybe I'm overstating your
no,
game.
No, that's true. But the interesting thing is, I always post, when I post the Manchester Connects,
Yeah.
is together we are better.
Yep.
Because it's been so beautiful that it's been a totally bipartisan activity it's probably the most joy I've ever received in anything I've ever done in my life, this project, and to have people like John and just several others in the
We should mention
organization
Sarah
committee.
Jacobs from UNH.
Sarah
She's Chief of
Jacobs, and they've
Strategic Planning.
hosted our meetings.
Yep.
Dia Solzhenitsyn from Sea Science,
US First.
Yeah.
US First, Harry Malone from Divine Millement.
Yep.
It's just been amazing. Of course, David from planning, Derek
Schuster.
Schuster
Yep.
from
Still with us.
planning.
Dana Berube from the Manchester Arts
Dana
Commission
Berube.
was with us.
It's-
Yes.
There's a lot of
There's
people involved.
so much
Right,
talent, and we want to reach beyond this group.
Right.
To find out who the people are that would be best suited to carry on different
Yep.
parts of this, because we know it's going to involve a lot of people, and so
And it's
we're
not
very
a 1 year.
open.
It's not a short-term project.
No.
I mean, we all know that building anything takes time.
Right.
And then, the whole downtown Milliard River area is really that's a large amount of land space.
It is, and for that reason, we are engaged in what we call the organizing committee right now. It's what I call the boring part, but they're letting me hang around anyway because I'm more of an action person than a planning person, but we want to be sustainable. And for that to be the case, we need to have an organization that can raise funds. So are we going to be a 501c3?
Right.
Are we going to be a separate entity? Do we go under the chamber? So all of these organizing principles that we're trying to address now will allow us to do that, to be sustainable over the long haul. We don't want to be a one-shot project and point and say, we did that and go away. There's too much human capital invested in this right now that we need to really bring together and focus on this thing going forward to take on these long-term projects, as you mentioned.
And this chamber has been so supportive and providing a space. And there's something that I learned when I was a chaplain in Europe during the Vietnam War, and it was that I remember this woman singing in our chapel, "If I can help somebody as I go my way, then my living shall not be in vain." And I think really the most important thing we can do in life is to help each other.
Yeah. That's what makes a community. I always say this, everybody thinks of me as this staunch Republican, I'm this partisan hack and all this stuff. But, when I go run for office, when I'm out knocking on doors, the best part of it is that I'm just meeting more people in my community. Like I say that, and I don't say that because I want people to think I'm this soft and fuzzy. It's just the best part.
Right.
And I tell people, if you could just make your own neighborhood better, just your neighborhood, not the whole city, just make your neighborhood better. Meet your neighborhood, know your neighbors, and then things do happen. Then you're able to build things like when we built the dog park. It's like, you can build a dog park. One little project and then walk away.
And by coming together, you can give birth to the visions that we all have.
Yeah.
Our river walk is grand for what it is. It's 3/10 of a mile.
Right.
I joke it's not a river walk, it's a river stroll because you can only go so far. But, apply the vision. Why doesn't it go all the way from the dam at Eversource all the way down to Elliott at River's Edge? Enjoy this river.
And then it would connect with the walking path.
Which is exactly what we intend to do, and take advantage of the rail trail, the bike trail that goes over the Piscataquag into Goffstown. That interconnectivity is at the heart of this study. It was about walkability, bikeability. Rail comes into it, and that was not so good a while ago, and now it's better, and we never know what's going to happen. But this is not contingent upon all of those things happening. It's what can we make happen.
So what kind of projects are in the idea? I don't know.
Well, for example, one that's probably as close to fruition as any is the reconstruction of Gateway Park at the corner of Granite and Commercial.
Okay.
If you think about it, that is the gateway to the city.
And it's boring right now.
It's boring, and it's underutilized. It was a construction landing site when they rebuilt the Granite Street Bridge.
Right, and then they just kind of left that circle there, and I kept waiting for it to be finished, and I'm like, I guess that is it.
Yeah, and for that reason, the soil is hard and compacted because of the heavy equipment. It's mostly gravel, not good grass. So we've been engaged in a planning process through UNH Manchester because of their land grant abilities and agricultural programs. So shortly, UNH is going to unveil the charrette, the design we've created for the park. It incorporates water elements, it incorporates historic elements from the museum, the Mill Yard Museum, and we think it's going to be a great that's what we can do. That's what we're capable of when we work together, to borrow from Cliff's phrase. So that's number one. There's a process underway right now to create a memorial statue, a bench statue, for Ralph Baer, the gentleman from Manchester who invented the home video game. Think about this multi-billion-dollar industry that has sprung. Blame or credit.
I'm looking at you, Dan.
But this is a process that's underway right now. We've already created a nonprofit under the umbrella of the Manchester Historic Association. We're about to begin the fundraising drive, about $60,000. No taxpayer money involved. It will have a maintenance fee. So this will be created by civic-minded people to celebrate a giant of the technology industry in the Mill Yard. So as you take your selfie, sitting alongside the statue of Ralph Baer, in the background will be the magnificent mills of Manchester. So these are examples of what we call creative placemaking. These are things that will draw people to what we call a third place. If you think about your life, you have work, you have home. That's your first place and your second place.
What gets me to someplace else?
What's the community element to get you to the third place, to get you out of your home and engage with other members of the community? These third places.
You'll be happy to know that the river is one of those places for me.
It's one of the magnets. Now, again, we suffer from the fact that Manchester was industrialized around the river, so we don't have the same access other communities might have.
We don't have a street. We don't have restaurants right on the river. We have a gap between the Mill Yard and the river.
So we're working to, again, integrate those things together. In my role at the Chamber, just as importantly, my role with Manchester Connects is to find a way to bring those components together so that dynamic, vital elements of the city are unified. And you want to, like yesterday, you walk down Elm Street on a Sunday, or whatever day it is now.
Whatever day that was.
And there are people out on Sunday afternoons walking on Elm Street, visiting the restaurants and the bars and the coffee shops. the soon-to-be bookstore in Elm Street. How much of a galvanizing element for a community is something like that?
That's right.
A third place where we can all get together and really, put the element of community back in the city. That's at the heart of Manchester Connects.
And the loop that brought us on today, that thing making Manchester one of the most walkable cities in America. And we think about the river. We're Manchester because of the river.
Right.
We were Manchester because of the power of the river. But I think we can be Manchester again because of the beauty of the river. And to have access and a walkway to go to the river with a loop will, I think, change things dramatically.
Well, this is very exciting. Okay, so spot locations, that makes sense. Do you ever foresee that it'll expand beyond? I mean, could 10 years from now that Manchester Connects be involved in things on the west side of the river?
That is absolutely integral to this plan, incorporating the west side of the river.
They're,
into it.
in the
I'm
design,
biased.
they're part
I
of
live
the
over
west
there on
side.
the west side.
I'm a west side boy myself.
I only come over here for this.
As a kid,
I work on the west side. I live on the west side.
Well, as a kid, we had no reason to come to the east side of the river. We had everything you possibly needed was on the west side. So we definitely want to reintegrate both sides of the river. That's a big part of it. But think about other elements that we haven't mentioned to make it a more walkable city.
Yep.
Have you ever tried to cross at Granite and Commercial at 1 in the
no.
afternoon, and you see a UNH student push the walk button?
And there's-
I take out my phone. I'm going to be there for 10 minutes. Why don't we have pedestrian flyovers like they do in Chicago and other elements?
Especially down. I mean, in that particular area would make. I don't think they need to be everywhere.
No.
But there is. I mean, that's a major connector, and there's people going to the ballpark, and there's people going to the Verizon. Well, it's not the Verizon. They're going to
The
the
Southern New Hampshire Arena.
arena, and and the college is there, and
Sure.
and the highway lets off there. And,
Yeah, and pedestrian crossovers at a couple of points on Canal Street. Again, Canal Street was not the canal. You mentioned Bridge and Richard.
Canal and Commercial are the most confusing.
Right. Canal
streets.
ran parallel to the upper canal. Bedford Street was the upper canal. But when you try to cross from the Mill Yard to cross Canal Street to
gotta
go to
cross
the
on the
downtown,
tracks.
you're literally sticking your head
Yes.
out of the bushes, and cars are going by at 55 miles an hour. So a couple of pedestrian flyovers there would be very functional, but also there'd be a lot of form attached to
Yeah.
it because it would be eligible for signage beneath
Right.
it. So you could have a corridor going down Canal Street, promoting the city.
Yeah.
Let's say we do 3 at
Right.
Dow Street, at Kidder Street, and then again
Right.
at Stark Street. Think about the coziness,
Right.
the enclosure. Canal Street wouldn't feel like the Wild West that it is now.
Well, right.
It would be traffic calming in its own way, and
Everybody talks about drawing more businesses. There's so many factors that go into what makes a company move here or what makes a family move here. And a lot of times I do feel, and I've always felt, we've just never really caught the right look for, Manchester doesn't have a look. Even
Right.
Elm Street, it's time and time again better than it was in the 90s or the 80s.
The
It was
80s and
really
90s.
desolate for a while there.
91 was
It was really bad.
nadir.
Yeah, when the banks all fell apart,
Yep.
it got really bad. The people who enjoy the restaurants downtown now have no idea that
Right.
there was nothing, there was no place to go, no reason to go.
But it was during that time that the Verizon
Yeah.
Center, the airport,
Yeah, and it
all
started and
happened.
slowly, so the downtown we have today, if you've moved here in the last even 20 years probably, is different.
you're welcome, is what we
Right?
say.
but the potential is so great. I
It
mean, you
really
think of
is.
the Dean Kamen's grant.
Yeah. Well, the fact
and
that we have
huge-
Dean Kamen who's willing to, the fact that that's a story in itself. The fact that Dean Kamen took invested in the Mill Yard. I never realized the degree that he had done. You hear about things, but you don't really, if you don't dig into the history,
Right.
you don't really get the crust of it. But we do have people who want to, I think, would invest. I think that younger people want. I mean, I just read a whole article in the paper or in an article magazine about millennials and what they seek in housing, which is interesting, and how home builders and renovators and decorators and whatnot, what millennials want, because it's not what our parents,
Right.
it's not the McMansion in Bedford. And, there's a change, and you can't always just live in we always had this, and that's the way it was, because times do change, and we always need to try to remember that, change is a good thing. And I don't know about you, but I'd love to be able to walk. I mean, we do now. I live on the west side. I can walk. One of my houses is right on the bike path, so I can go from the bike path. I can go across the river. I can go to the baseball stadium. I could walk up to the Civic Center, a little sketchy crossing the railroad tracks near the baseball stadium, which is kind of weird, but okay. You know, we can bike and get down to Sundial, and then it gets all sketchy and weird.
Right.
But we can bike up to Elm Street, but then it would be nice to not have to just all of a sudden be dropped in the city. It'd be nice to be able to go down Commercial Street and be more on the river.
Yes.
For longer, and then maybe connect, and maybe eventually there'd be a path and it would get us to Livingston.
And one innovation this past year was the introduction of the Zagster bicycle
Yeah.
racks, which again is a commercial component
Yeah.
that is in many northeastern cities. People thought that with the winter weather it wouldn't fly here.
Yeah.
I still look and I'll go by and there'll be
People
three bikes on the
people
rack.
bike all winter long. It's not it's not the bike of when we were little kids riding around. Then you put your bike away for the winter. People with bicycles ride all year long.
And one thing I've looked into, 293 is going to be widened to 3 lanes, all from 5 up to
Yes, I
7
know.
when they build the new
Look at
interchanges.
me. Yes, I know.
And we've looked at the possibility, if there's room along the
The
riverside on the west side for a bike path.
That would be nice.
There's grand plans around that.
Okay. I'm not a big fan of the highway expansion for a variety of reasons.
No.
But
We
if
know
you,
it's going to
if you
happen.
saw,
It's going to happen, and I was just like,
and if you could see the accidents at exit 6.
I do. Well, I know
that was
exactly where
bu-
the problem
that,
child
that
is.
interchange was built
But-
in 1950.
I mean, I'm sure there's good reasons, and then
Right.
Yeah, we got to
it's
do
never
it.
perfect.
But if it's going to happen, we want to capitalize on the opportunities
Well, and I
that
would hope
present
that if
themselves.
it's going to happen, we're going to incorporate just more than a high. Like, let's think about if we're designing a new whole highway interchange, how is this going to impact the land around it, and how can we best utilize the
what's
land
available.
around it to make it pretty, to make it usable, to make it friendly to.
See, the interchange will be built first, a complete interchange at 7 up beyond
Mm-hmm.
the dump area. And the Amoskeag area will actually be pedestrian accessible and bike accessible in the design they plan.
And we haven't even talked about parking.
I know, yeah.
Which
parking
you should
is-
know is at the heart of this study, because parking is an issue to this
Yeah.
day. PillPack, one of the grand pharmaceutical companies
Yep.
in the mill yard, came to visit me last week or 2 weeks ago about parking. They could hire 125
But
more
there's no
employees
place to
today.
put-
They have no place to put
Right.
them.
And there's no way, and I don't, and it amazes me because if you really do look at an overhead of the downtown Manchester area, it seems like sometime in the last couple decades somebody should have stopped and said, there has to be a plan here. We built a civic center with no parking,
Right.
and it's manageable. I mean, you can go.
It was better we did it that way for that particular
Yes,
thing.
but
though.
now, it is 20 years later, and,
In southern New Hampshire, just was approved to build a 1,700 car parking garage in the mill yard
right over near at the Lang.
at Langer Place
Yeah.
next to the
With a beautiful
hotel.
design.
No,
Garden.
that was really good because that'll help with.
But we need, I had Drew Klein interview Arthur Sullivan and Dick Henignos, and they figure there's about a need for about 5,000 parking
I believe
spaces.
it.
And so Kevin Clardy is working on a plan now that I think will be workable.
Okay.
We brought in Bill Binney's people and Sullivan's people and Henignos, and they looked at it and thought it would be a good thing.
So, because I know she's going to flash something soon that
Okay.
says we're almost out of time.
Kirsten's at the controls.
So Manchester Connects. If people wanted to find out more about this we have 5 minutes. We have plenty of
good.
time, but we'll talk. Let's get the gory details out. So if people wanted to find out more information about Manchester Connects, or what's going on now, or how they can fund it, if you decide to be a 501c3, can people donate?
Make donations. Yeah.
This is all important stuff.
Yeah,
Where
because
can they
we've
give
had-
you money? How can they volunteer? And what can they see to be excited about?
The best way to reach out to us now and become part of the family is to go to our Facebook page, which is simply called Manchester Connects. It's that simple. Cliff and Sarah Jacobs are the two administrators who are welcoming people in. We have a master email list of the people who've come to those public sessions. So we are poised to act as soon as we get the structure in place. So the key now we ask is patience.
Yep.
Every day someone comes up to me and says, hey, I really want to be involved. What can I do? Be patient. Let us get this organizational structure ready. And when that's ready, we hope to open in grand fashion. The Loop event will take place again in the spring,
Good.
in May.
Okay.
We're hoping to have the Ralph Baer statue in place at that time. So that will be a new stop on the Loop with a little history about who Mr. Baer was. Lived over on Mayflower Drive in the north end of the city. He escaped the Holocaust from Germany, worked for the U.S. military intelligence when he came here, worked at Sanders Associates, and created, again, what we is known as the Brown Box, the first video game in television in history. And those are the kinds of individuals we want to celebrate on the loop. Not just what happened in the past, but what's happening in the future to make this the dynamic community we know it can be.
And I think what Susan Silverberg said, our planner, she said, I've worked in cities all around the world, and Manchester has the greatest core of community people that she's ever met. And I think our potential is so great with what's happening with the business in the Mill Yard and the area. We're just in a day that we can really explode. Other people are writing about Manchester Rising. There's just a lot of positive things happening.
Absolutely.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So I'm going to let you do another shameless plug. So now you run the Manchester run the Manchester Mill Yard Museum.
I'm the executive director of the Manchester Historic
you.
Association, under which the Mill Yard Museum is part of the
And
umbrella.
that's located on between Commercial and Canal.
Yes,
Commercial and Bedford.
At 200 Bedford Street on the one side, with the steel and glass tower,
Yeah.
same building as the Sea Science Center, or on the Commercial Street side at 255 Commercial. Dean Kamen was in with about 250 of his new closest friends from his Advanced Regenerative Manufacturing Institute project about 2 weeks ago. They're excited because as they bring new people to work and live in the Mill Yard, it's important they understand the legacy of the place in which they're coming to work. So we're working hand in glove with Dean and Maureen Toohey and Gray Chenoweth and the people from Army to make sure that the people who come here understand what kind of a community they're coming in. We were the largest textile manufacturing city in the world.
I know.
And now we're on the verge of becoming the largest human tissue and blood and organ regenerating
I don't think
manufacturer.
I think some people don't really grasp
How great it is.
what like the degree of what's happening down there.
From textiles to tech.
Yep.
The concept is so difficult to grasp because Dean said to me, the only difference between science and science fiction is time.
Yep.
And now
I
is
agree.
the time. This may sound like science fiction,
But it's
we
not.
have the technology, the DNA technology, the 3D printing,
Yep.
and the people he's bringing together.
Right. I was going to say all anybody has to think is, Dan, my partner Dan, his grandmother lived to be 99, almost 100 years old, and we're talking the span of her life. Think about what somebody who lived, would be her twin sister was 104 now. Imagine that. What she's seen in 104 years. But if you look at somebody who's 30 today, and just think of things that they just presume or just take for granted, and where to us,
The internet.
a cordless phone was a big deal.
Cell phones, right?
That was a big deal. How's that going to work?
Yeah.
So technology is, once it starts, it goes so fast, and so many things that you see in movies, and people think, oh, that's crazy, that's never going to happen, and I'm like, well, I wouldn't be so sure about that.
Dick Tracy with the wrist
Right.
radio.
Who thought there would ever be a watch? So why would
1930.
anybody have it do anything other than
And the Pandora building on the 6th floor is going to be renovated now for part of this project.
University of New
Awesome.
Hampshire for bioengineering and biomechanical
That's amazing.
engineering.
That's just wonderful. It is. It's really good. Well, anyways, I am so glad that the two of you joined you. I would love to have you back again when you're more settled,
place-
so that we can send everybody with their donations to you and things like that, and we can get more support in the city.
And a
do-
task list, because we're
Right.
going to have hands-on volunteers.
Well,
This
and
is-
people to volunteer. I know a lot of people that I know a lot of people. You know a lot of people.
Excellent.
But I'm just saying there's always people who want to help do something positive because, it's not all about politics. It's not all about, ourselves.
And
it is
as
about our
Kevin
community.
Clardy says, we got to get the millennials involved in this. This is
Yep.
really going to
Well,
be
'cause
there.
it's going to benefit them probably the most for the
Absolutely.
longest.
This was not meant to sit on a shelf.
That's
this is
right.
an action plan.
So, John, Clayton, Cliff, Hurst, thank you so much for joining me today. If you have any questions that I could relay on to them, you can find them at Manchester Connects on Facebook, but you can always email me at manchtalk@gmail.com, or you can follow me on Facebook or Twitter at ManchTalk, all one word. I'll definitely have these guys back again when we got more to talk about. And in the meantime, get out there in Manchester, enjoy the great outdoors, take a walk down Elm Street or on the bike path, and I'll see you again next week. Bye.
Thank you for inviting us.
Thanks very
Thanks,
much,
guys.
Tammy.